everyone, and welcome to Another Explainer. I'm really excited you're here today because we are going to look at the literal mechanics behind how great ideas actually become real. We're diving into a simple, straightforward guide explaining exactly how companies start and grow. And to do that, we're focusing on the essential architect behind it all, business capital. So picture this. You've got this brilliant business idea. Maybe it's a sleek new clothing brand, or, an incredible neighborhood restaurant with a secret family recipe, or maybe a bustling online store that is just absolutely going to disrupt the market. You can see the whole thing perfectly in your head. But right out of the gate, you hit a brick wall, a massive, incredibly expensive brick wall. You need money before you can make money, right? So where exactly does that cash come from? How do you actually pay for the fabric, the commercial ovens, or the website developers? Well, that is the core conflict every single founder faces, and overcoming it is what we call business financing. Okay, so let's get our baseline established. What are we actually dealing with here? Business financing simply means obtaining the funds you need to start, operate, or grow a business. Basically, you can think of this capital as the absolute essential fuel your engine requires. I mean, you wouldn't try to drive a high-performance sports car across the country on a completely empty tank, right? Well, companies are exactly the same way. They absolutely need this financing to buy crucial equipment, hire those very first employees, rent out a retail space, buy raw inventory, and eventually expand into entirely new markets. Without this financing, even the absolute best, most world-changing ideas might just never become reality. They just stay ideas. To help us figure this all out, here's our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at 1. Funding from within, 2. Borrowing to build, 3. Sharing the pie, 4. Modern ways to fund, and finally, 5. Making the right choice. Let's just jump straight into it. Option number 1, funding from within, which basically means using your own resources. All right, the very first source of funding most founders look to is internal financing. You've probably heard this called bootstrapping. This essentially means using money that comes straight from the business itself or directly out of the owner's pockets. You are literally pulling fuel from resources you already possess. Think of your classic tech startup born in a dusty residential garage. That is internal financing in action. The most common examples? Well, you'll see founders dipping into their personal savings accounts or using retained profits if the business is already up and running and making some cash. Or sometimes even selling unused assets like an extra car or old machinery just to free up some immediate capital. But there's a really stark trade-off here. On the one hand, and this is a huge plus, the absolute biggest advantage of internal financing is the massive relief of having zero debt and zero loss of ownership. You answer to absolutely no one but yourself. You make the rules, you keep the profits. Done deal. But you have to weigh that directly against the glaring disadvantage. The available amount of money is often incredibly limited. You literally only have what you have. Keeping total control is fantastic, for sure, but running out of fuel halfway down the runway is an incredibly frustrating reality for founders who rely solely on their own wallets. And that brings us to our second path, borrowing to build, otherwise known as debt financing. So, if your own internal funds just aren't quite enough to get you off the ground, what do? You look outward. Debt financing simply means you're borrowing money to fuel the engine, with a strict understanding that you are going to pay it back later. And yeah, usually with interest. The most common examples are your traditional bank loans, where you get a large lump sum. But there are actually some other really handy tools too. Business credit lines, for instance, give you flexible spending for when those unexpected costs inevitably pop up. Invoice financing is cool because it lets you cash in immediately on money you're already owed by clients, rather than sitting around waiting 60 days for them to pay you. And then there's trade credit, which is when your suppliers basically give you a grace period to pay for your materials. These are the classic, real-world tools businesses have used for literally decades. But again, check out the balancing act here. On the plus side, you get to keep full 100% ownership. Debt financing lets you retain total equity. You aren't giving away a single slice of your company to anybody. But look at the heavy anvil on the other side. Regular repayments can put intense, constant pressure on your daily cash flow. It's a heavy anxiety, honestly. Yes, you keep your equity, but you also gain a mandatory monthly bill that has to be paid no matter what. Whether you had a record-breaking sales month or a terrible one, it doesn't matter. The bank doesn't care if it rained all week and foot traffic was practically zero. They still want their payment. Let's move on to our third option, sharing the pie, which is equity financing. Okay, so instead of taking on that heavy burden of monthly debt, there's another really popular route. Equity financing is when a business sells a literal portion of its ownership to investors. If you've ever tuned into a show like Shark Tank, you've seen equity financing playing out right in front of you. You're trading a slice of your company for a sudden, massive injection of fuel. The heavy hitters in this space include angel investors, usually wealthy individuals funding startups, or venture capital firms, which are massive organizations managing millions of dollars specifically for high-growth companies. Or, simply selling shares to the public. These folks have the resources to fund rapid, explosive growth, taking your business to the next level way faster than you could probably manage alone. Now, the crucial thing to understand here is just how intense this trade-off is. The biggest advantage? Immediate breathing room. You don't have those monthly financial repayments hovering over your head like you do with a bank loan. If the business has a slow month, hey, you don't know the investor's a fixed monthly fee. But the downside is permanent. You now have to share your profits and, much more importantly, your decision-making power. You aren't the absolute boss anymore. You literally have partners at the table. They often sit on your board of directors, and they get a very real, very loud say in how your company is run. Now let's explore our fourth area. Modern ways to fund that step way beyond traditional banks and venture capital. Today, founders aren't just limited to walking into a local bank branch or pitching wealthy investors in a stuffy boardroom. We have more creative options than ever before. Crowdfunding platforms like Kickstarter or Indiegogo are absolutely incredible because they allow thousands of everyday people to chip in small amounts. Seriously, some projects, like a cool new smartwatch or an innovative board game, have literally raised millions just by crowdsourcing their fuel directly from their future customers. Then there's leasing, which completely bypasses the need for massive upfront capital. It lets companies simply rent their heavy equipment, vehicles, or tech without buying it outright. Oh, and definitely don't forget government grants. Depending on your industry or where you live, these can provide crucial funding that sometimes doesn't require a single cent of repayment. All right, this brings us to our final and honestly most important section, making the right choice through strategy and timing. Let's look at how this actually plays out in the real world. This is the systematic progression of how capital scales a business from a raw, totally untested idea to a market leader. Step 1. You acquire the funding using the methods we literally just talked about, pulling from savings, grabbing a loan, or securing an angel investor. Step 2. Once you have that cash, you immediately use it as fuel to buy necessary equipment and hire your founding team. Step 3. Now that you're operational, you establish your physical footprint. You rent offices or retail space and purchase enough inventory to meet demand. And finally, Step 4. With a solid, profitable foundation under you, you use your remaining or newly acquired capital to expand into completely new markets. It's a very logical, step-by-step progression of growth. Take a look at this matrix because it really breaks down the actual decision-making process. The best financing option, it's not a one-size-fits-all answer. It depends entirely on your specific situation. How much money do you actually need? How fast do you need it? What's the risk level of your industry? And crucially, how much control are you actually willing to give up? Notice the breakdown here. A brand new startup usually leans heavily toward personal savings and angel investors. Why? Because they're inherently high risk, and traditional banks might just flat out say no. On the flip side, an established company with a proven multi-year track record is much more likely to prefer bank loans or relying on their own retained profits, simply because they have the stable cash flow to handle debt safely without giving away their valuable equity. At the end of the day, everything we've covered here really boils down to this one fundamental truth. Business financing is the fuel that keeps companies moving. Whether you're quietly pulling from your own personal savings account, signing a major loan at the bank, partnering up with angel investors for a piece of the pie, or rallying the crowd online, every single successful business needs access to capital. The real secret to enduring growth is simply choosing the right source of funding at the exact right time. In business, having a great idea is absolutely crucial. We need those brilliant, disruptive ideas to solve problems and to push the world forward. But having the actual resources to bring those ideas out of your head and into reality, that is what truly makes growth possible. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Great ideas are important, but what will fuel yours? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope you feel fully equipped to take that next big step. See you next time.